Open your eyes.
If you are wondering why everything going on in the world feels so terribly off, then you have come to the right place. A veil has been put over the eyes of humanity. Evil people in high places have been hiding the truth in plain sight and building a false reality on lies and deception for far too long. And now, their time is coming to an end. It's time to fight back, to wake up, and to begin an uprising. Now is a time for judgment.
This is a time for judgment. Welcome to today's show. I needed to cover this story about Vladimir Zelensky, you know, everybody's hero, the Time Life Man of the Year. And again, I want to put a disclaimer in this that obviously we all support Ukraine. We all love Ukraine. I have currently wearing my Ukraine t-shirt as I'm recording this. I have a Ukraine flag tattoo actually that I'm working on getting. Just a huge fan. Got the pin on. I'm getting bed sheets. So just want to make sure the algo, anyone out there doesn't get the wrong message here. But I'm a little skeptical of what Vladimir's doing here. I have to be honest with you because, well, you remember BlackRock, right? And Larry Fink, you know, one of the wealthiest guys in the world, one of the guys who pumps money into China, one of the guys who we all think about the Klaus Schwabs of the world. Larry Fink always seems to get a free pass. And one of the reasons that a lot of Republican, quote unquote, people give him a free pass is because Larry Fink's a buddy of Donald Trump. But we're supposed to believe that Larry Fink is wonderful and great. Now, you might remember me covering Larry Fink many times talking about behavioral control and how Larry Fink is teaching and programming behavioral control. BlackRock is one of the biggest companies in the world as far as data mining goes. But here's Larry talking about behavioral control.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors.
So Larry Fink, a lot of people are like, oh, wow, Larry Fink. Yeah, he's really wealthy and does a lot of shady business, right? Well, guess what he's doing now? Vladimir Zelensky and Larry Fink of BlackRock are agreeing to help rebuild Ukraine. That's right. So, you know, a lot of those low-income housing projects that Larry Fink works on, you know, Larry Fink owns a lot of land as well as Vanguard in this country. Looks like we have a social experiment occurring in Ukraine with Larry Fink and BlackRock at the helm. So they're going to rebuild Ukraine. And they're going to use your tax money to do so. That's right. You're funding this project. Americans are funding this project. BlackRock's not putting any of their money into it. No. They're managing our tax money that's being given to Ukraine so that they can work together to rebuild Ukraine. So if you think that Ukraine, they constantly are talking about Ukraine being a republic, being a democracy, all these talking points, which obviously we know what the mainstream media is all about. And if you're not familiar, Larry Fink owns most of the mainstream media as well, or has his hand in it at least. But this country will no longer be a republic if Larry Fink gets his hands on it. Larry Fink is communism 101. Larry Fink is about mining your data, studying the things that you do. All those remarketing campaigns and things like that you see happening, Larry Fink's one of the people behind that. Larry Fink's got his hand in Amazon, Facebook, Google, you name it. BlackRock is in bed with everyone, and BlackRock is really one of these corporations that controls governments around the world, especially here in America. Now, BlackRock will be able to control, really, in reality, its own country. So I'm going to play a clip for you so you can get a little bit more of an understanding of who Larry Fink is. And then I will go into more detail about this partnership with Zelensky. Here's a look at the history of Larry Fink. Someone put a video together that sums it up pretty well. The history of who he is, what he's involved in, a lot of the spying strategies of China. These are all things from Larry Fink directly. And now Larry's going to be rebuilding Ukraine with your tax money.
This is a company most people have never heard of, and this company quite literally owns the world. Most US banks are controlled by BlackRock. BlackRock owns all the major pharmaceutical companies. BlackRock owns most of the mainstream media, and BlackRock oversees roughly 10% of all stocks traded worldwide. And this company is now taking over governments. All of this has allowed BlackRock to amass $10 trillion in assets. Yes, trillion. BlackRock is worth half of America's total GDP. It's so crazy that the US and Chinese government now rely on BlackRock to escape recessions, with BlackRock's founder and CEO now sitting on the boards of the influential Council on Foreign Relations and the World Economic Forum. In the words of Henry Kissinger, whoever controls the money controls the world, and no other company in history has had this much global influence. And what's even crazier is that BlackRock did this in just 34 years. But you want to know the best part? You've probably never heard of them for a reason which will become clearer later on, because after you watch this video, you will soon understand the real-world consequences of BlackRock's vast control.
Full-scale invasion, the likes of which we haven't seen since World War II, of Russia into Ukraine.
And those high gas prices mean the cost of everything that needs to be transported is on the rise.
So then how could BlackRock gain so much influence over the world? How could BlackRock go from being just a boring investment firm to the most powerful company that has ever existed? Well, to start, we have to delve into the past of how Larry Fink made BlackRock. Larry was born into a wealthy Los Angeles family in 1952, and from the start, he was always hungry for power, with his early years spent pursuing a career in politics, where he would gain a BA in political science from UCLA. However, he soon enough realized that politics isn't where the real power is, money is. Following this, he changed his focus early on to go into banking and real estate. And while at college, Fink was immersing himself in the world of the rich and powerful, having been a full-time member of the secretive Kappa Beta Phi, a group that's members included Michael Bloomberg and the Goldman Sachs chairmen. Fink took full advantage of these connections and started a career in the mortgage bond department at First Boston, a boring New York-based investment bank. This was where Larry would make his mark on the financial world, because over his time at First Boston, Fink became one of the highest earning employees, generating over $1 billion. He was unstoppable and it seemed like he was going to be crowned CEO. Larry became an expert in these little understood investments during his time. However, this success didn't come without a price. He wasn't going to make this money for someone other than him, and so he began creating a ticking time bomb, and only he knew how to defuse it. So in 1986, his risky practices and ambition caught up to him. After a few too many risky trades, Larry made a huge blunder. He lost $100 million of this bank's money in just the space of months. All the goodwill and reputation he had gained was crumbling into dust, leading to him being banished from First Boston. It seemed like world domination was just a silly fantasy, that he would never make it to the top. However, Fink wasn't giving up his power this easily. Instead, he would use this disaster to his advantage, vowing to make risk management and avoidance his main focus from now on. And so after becoming unemployed at age 36, Fink would team up with some of his old connections from Kappa Beta Phi, and in 1988, BlackRock was formed. In no time at all, Larry was making bank. In just 5 years, BlackRock went from being worth $5 million to over $8 billion. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. During this time, a power struggle would emerge between who would control BlackRock's future, because Fink wanted a bigger piece of the pie. He didn't want to share his plans for world domination. So in 1995, he would pressure one of the co-founders, Schwartzman, to sell their stake in BlackRock for $250 million, a stake that would now be worth over $12 billion alone. But after these power games, Larry Fink's path to world domination was unstoppable. Larry Fink became more and more powerful over the next decade, but this still wasn't enough for his ambition. Now earlier on, I mentioned a ticking time bomb that Fink helped create in his early days at First Boston. Well, this time bomb was now ready to explode, and in 2008, the worst financial crash since the Great Depression struck the world.
Traders saying this is the craziest day they have ever seen in these markets. Veteran traders saying they've never seen anything like it. The movement in oil prices so fast.
The most serious recession in decades. And that means life, as most Americans know it, is about to change.
And the best part is, this was all under Larry's control. Larry Fink's mortgage-backed securities had been the fuse all along. And because Larry Fink knew the 2008 crash would happen, BlackRock's focus on asset management sealed them from the crisis. In fact, this disaster was an opportunity for Larry Fink, because Larry was the only man on Wall Street who could fix this crisis. And so with Larry's personal connections with the Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner, BlackRock secured an uncontested contract to manage the assets of multiple banks that crumbled during the crisis, exploiting this disaster to become the most powerful man on Wall Street. But still, this was only Wall Street. This still wasn't close to world domination. So how could Larry Fink control governments and the world economy? Well, BlackRock made another breakthrough by offering ETFs. Now this might sound quite technical, but ETFs are a type of investment fund that puts money into all the companies in a certain industry. And these new investment funds proved wildly popular because of the stability and solid returns. And unsurprisingly, BlackRock became the largest player in this new market, reaching the top of its industry, sucking up money from everywhere using its new money management platform. From the biggest banks to the smallest retirement funds, BlackRock had a hand in it all. BlackRock was starting to control everything. They bought stakes in pretty much every major corporation on the stock market. I mean, if you look into who owns pretty much any major company, you're almost guaranteed to find BlackRock's name. Larry could also see the power technology would have in the future economy, which is why BlackRock poured masses of wealth to build a supercomputer that analyzes what investments will make money. This program, named Aladdin, would go on to manage over $20 trillion worth of assets for BlackRock. For context, $20 trillion is more than the entire United States' GDP. BlackRock would then use this money and its assets to further exert their control over the economy, and now they are inextricably tied to governments. And like 2008, the Federal Reserve hired BlackRock to manage their investments to protect them from coronavirus-led recessions. And BlackRock has used this dependence to grow their empire even further, allowing Larry Fink to be a billionaire oligarch that holds unprecedented power over not just the economy, but the entire world. He controls trends, culture, foreign policy, and the banks. He has world leaders at his beck and call, with BlackRock overseeing assets worth 10% of the world's global economy. BlackRock now owns stakes in every industry, from media companies, banks, oil companies, and weapon manufacturers. And in recent years, the consequences are becoming dire as Larry Fink begins to exert his control over the world. One of the ways BlackRock controls the world so well is through its control of the media. Together with Vanguard, an investment company they also partly own, BlackRock now controls 18% of Fox, 16% of CBS, 13% of Comcast, who themselves own NBC, MSNBC, CNBC, and Sky, and they even own 12% of Disney. This is very important because it means that for any of these companies to decide on company policy, they must now also consult with BlackRock before doing so. And it's just the same with big tech. BlackRock is now the biggest institutional investor in Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, and so many more. I mean, the list of their investments in companies is just endless. And by extending its reach in such a dramatic way, BlackRock now has control over more than 90% of the media, which might also be why you've never heard of them. Because controlling the media is a very important step for BlackRock to take over the world. If everyone knew the consequences of BlackRock owning over $9.5 trillion in assets, some questions might start to be raised. And you see, BlackRock's control isn't just extending through information in the media, but also through the entire world's economic and political data. And as I mentioned before, this is all done through Aladdin, where Aladdin accurately predicts the outcome of every single investment. But the question is, where does Aladdin get this information from? Well, that's where things become very jarring. You see, because of BlackRock's ownership of banks, insurance companies, social media giants, and even pension funds, Aladdin now possesses huge amounts of personal data on everyone who has ever knowingly or unknowingly given BlackRock money. And with such a powerful tool under their arsenal, everyone now wants a piece of the pie. And by controlling this much data, BlackRock now controls governments, because BlackRock can use this data to sway companies and even government decisions. For example, BlackRock successfully lobbied to get a contract to manage the EU's regulation of banks. However, this backroom deal is now being investigated as BlackRock themselves own the banks they should be regulating. And this is just one of the many examples of these sorts of actions. A 2016 study in the Journal of Finance documented that investment companies like BlackRock show, quote, widespread behind-the-scenes intervention in the companies that they own stakes in. And this problem only gets worse as BlackRock owns stakes in nearly all major publicly traded companies. And now with our current recession, BlackRock is buying as much homes and real estate as possible, causing regular house prices to skyrocket. BlackRock profits when a society doesn't own their homes but rents, because BlackRock can squeeze even more money out of the economy through mortgaging off these artificially inflated homes. But this whole situation becomes even more sinister when you realize BlackRock's power is now being compromised by other actors. For example, in August 2020, BlackRock became the first foreign company to be allowed access into China's mutual fund industry. This means that BlackRock can now invest and own parts of Chinese companies. God only knows what BlackRock promised Xi Jinping if they're allowed in, but by being allowed in, BlackRock now works with companies that are blacklisted by the US. One example is BlackRock's investment in a CCP-owned company called Hikvision. Hikvision makes security and communications technology for both civilian and military use by the Chinese government, and they're also known for their wide-scale human rights abuses.
How do you think your facial recognition technology will change China?
Everything happened in the public can be recorded.
Now, this money being invested into China isn't just BlackRock's own money. Most of this money comes from the pension funds and bank accounts that ordinary people pay into BlackRock inadvertently. Through BlackRock controlling banks, people have no choice about whether they give BlackRock and the CCP this money. That's if they even know about BlackRock. This recent trend of BlackRock funding authoritarian regimes can only mean bad things for Western democracy, because this empowers regimes like China and Russia. It gives credence to dystopian regimes, and this trend is now promoting others to do the same. I mean, BlackRock recently recommended that their investors triple their investments in China. This would place billions more into a dystopian regime at the expense of the West. And the worst part is that China sees the companies that operate within it as simply extensions of the one-party state. They own these companies, and in return the companies act out the CCP's will, which is a worrying fact when you consider that BlackRock owns the entire world's data. TikTok's data harvesting is nothing compared to BlackRock's. BlackRock knows the entire world's bank details, their preferences, tastes. It sets social trends, it oversees entire countries. So any increase in Chinese investments will see not just BlackRock's influence grow, but also China's influence grow in BlackRock. Since August of 2020, when BlackRock were first allowed into the Chinese economy, they have only poured more and more money into these Chinese companies. Clearly Aladdin the supercomputer sees this as a profitable move, but what it might not see is the destruction of Western values. It might not see how the CCP could influence the world economy and global politics even more than it already is. It might not see that BlackRock's huge investments will be the catalyst towards this change. I mean, who knows how much more BlackRock will invest in China? But if their growth over the past year is a sign of anything, China will inevitably become a much bigger part of BlackRock's future. And make no mistake, this will have dire consequences. But the cherry on top of all of this is that BlackRock is the main force behind the sheepish woke lecturing that tells you how guilty you should feel. In 2018, around the dawn of the new generation of political correctness, Larry wrote a letter telling all the companies under his thumb to, quote, contribute to society or risk losing our support, adding that, quote, society is demanding that companies, both public and private, serve a social purpose. Which is a very interesting statement coming from a company that is quite literally funding the persecution of weaker Muslims and the imprisonment of the Chinese population. A company that is funding a dystopic nuclear regime that is quite literally threatening the very fabric of Western civilization. And so with BlackRock's push for, quote, social purposes, companies now have an ESG score, or in other words, sustainable investing scores, where you have a rating system based on your company's political and social facades. So for example, doing a woke ad for a company like Nike, or silencing any controversial political views on social media will help you get the high ESG score.
They will, on their investor relations page, they'll show you their ESG score. ESG stands for environmental, social, corporate governance. And this is where the woke culture comes from. So they've created this kind of phony baloney rating system that says, well, if you, I'm exaggerating, but if you mention that you are, have a green agenda and you believe in carbon credits and you might trade some credits somewhere, then you get a higher score and therefore you're more investable. And it's very interesting to see how big investors like insurance company, institutional investors, they are steering away from anything that does not have the right ESG rating.
And if the past tells us anything, it seems like BlackRock is only destined to control more and more of our daily lives. Through Larry Fink's close ties with government leaders around the world, with his huge influence over the World Economic Forum, and his position on the boards of the Council on Foreign Relations, BlackRock is only destined to metastasize. So perhaps BlackRock defines the new era of our globalized world, where ruthless, predatory corporations amass more power than countries, where our politics and society isn't dictated by votes, it's dictated by investment boards controlled by BlackRock, delivering us a more generic, mindless, vapid, and vicious culture. Perhaps BlackRock is just a monument to a world divided between too big to fail companies and powerless, moneyless, and joyless citizens, where companies like BlackRock buy up all our houses, inflating our currencies and profit from our conflicts and turmoil. That's why you can't buy a house. That's why we're more divided than ever. That's why too big to fail companies are defining life in the 2020s. Because we no longer live under free market capitalism, we live under a system for socialism for the rich.
So he seems like a great guy, right? He wants to control your behavior. He wants to monitor what you're doing on the internet. He wants to monitor what you're doing in your bathroom. He wants to monitor what you're doing in your bedroom. And a lot of this technology, like this facial recognition stuff, that we're seeing more and more in China, social credit scores, a lot of this stuff stems through a partnership with their government and BlackRock and corporations like BlackRock. And pretty much what they're going to turn Ukraine into is it looks like a corporation. Possibly this will be where they set up their first experiment as far as bringing in what this global government's going to look like. Now, a lot of it is going to look like China, But there's a lot more things that are going to be done and a lot more things that need to be needed to put in place, at least if they're going to try to pull that crap here in America. But Zelensky and BlackRock CEO Larry Fink agreed to work together on investments aimed at rebuilding the war-torn country after Russia's invasion. The agreement followed a video meeting between Zelensky and Fink. BlackRock has taken an adversary role on how Ukraine should handle investments related to reconstruction. So you just heard a bunch of stuff about Fink, about how he invested, how, the government's leaned on him, some of the activities that he's done, which seem very shady, don't they? As far as how he has this large amount of money that he has. But, this is great, right? We're going to turn to Larry Fink here. So Vladimir Zelensky and Larry Fink agreed to focus in the near term on coordinating the efforts of all potential investors and participants in the reconstruction of our country, channeling investment into the most relevant and impactful sectors of the Ukrainian economy. During the conversation, it was emphasized that certain BlackRock leaders plan to visit Ukraine in the new year. This article I'm reading, this one is from the Post. It says the Post reached out to BlackRock for comment. The firm is the world's largest asset manager with $10 trillion in holdings. Zelensky also confirmed that Ukraine will participate in the World Economic Forum in Davos next month, Bloomberg reported. And again, of course, Zelensky will be there, but so will Fink, because Fink's buddies with Klaus Schwab. These corporations like Vanguard and BlackRock, they work directly with the World Economic Forum. Who do you think funds the World Economic Forum? Who do you think funds what they like to call these think tanks, when really what they are enslavement conversations and ideas that they're having for us, for planning for us, not for themselves, for us. They're not going to live the way that they talk about this wonderful world of utopia and everybody's going to go green. They're not living like that. That's to enslave the rest of us and to monitor us at all times. And that BlackRock and Vanguard play a huge part in that. So Zelensky did not specify whether he planned to personally attend the event in Davos, which of course I will be covering. So make sure you check those videos out when the time comes. There's always a lot of stuff to talk about coming out of there. The November 10th agreement included plans for establishing a roadmap for the investment framework's implementation, including identifying design choices for the envisioned setup, structure, mandate, and governance. BlackRock will also provide adversary support for designing an investment framework with a goal of creating opportunities for both public and private investors to participate in the future reconstruction and recovery of the Ukrainian economy. I mean, if this just doesn't sum up everything that we see going on with how corporations like Google, corporations like Amazon, how they're in control and they're the ones who are censoring free speech and doing this stuff, working with the governments. Well, now we're going to have BlackRock. We're going to have an investment, a gigantic, you want to call it an investment firm, or you want to call it, let's just call it a new world order, but we're going to have them pretty much building a country. This is like the equivalent of like Jeff Bezos buying Ukraine. It's like, oh yeah, Jeff Bezos just bought Ukraine. He's going to rebuild it in his image. And people will be like, what? He's buying the actual country? You could buy a country like that? Oh, what do you think this is? They're building their global government right underneath everybody's noses. And the poor people of Ukraine, they're not a part. We see all this stuff with Ukraine. It's like the people of Ukraine are not a part of what they're doing. Zelensky is not very popular over there either, which I can't get into deep detail about because it's apparently not nice to say. But all the stuff you see is just the opposite is what's really occurring as far as Zelensky and what the people over there. So the agreement between BlackRock and Ukraine emerged just days after Zelensky traveled to Washington. You might remember he was in D.C., of course, in his camo gear that he wears every single day. And everyone was crying and kissing him and doing the speech. I mean, the stuff that our country is doing right now and what our government is in bed with is just frightening. Absolutely frightening. And I know that governments have always been controlled for the most part. And, there's a lot of you could have bad people in a good Congress. You could have good people in a bad Congress. But what they're doing now is so beyond illegal, so beyond just what most people can fathom. This whole wave our flags and send support and all that stuff is just the biggest deception that could be possibly going on right now, other than the one that just occurred a couple years ago. But this is what we got going on. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink rebuilding Ukraine with your tax money. I wonder what it's going to look like, right? A lot of facial. It's going to be a surveillance state to a T. And Larry Fink is going to be at the helm. But you never hear the mainstream media covering this with Larry Fink because Larry Fink controls most of the mainstream media. You don't think Larry Fink has his hand in Fox News? You never hear his name on Fox News. They bring up Klaus Schwab once in a while, and they bring Davos up once in a while. They don't bring up Fink. And a lot of Republicans, these right-wing alt media people, they always are, oh, Larry Fink is wonderful because Trump's buddies with him. So that's why you never hear anything about Larry Fink. So now Larry Fink, this guy who's pretty much wants the world to be like China, is going to start his own little country pet peeve project in Ukraine on our dime. Isn't that wonderful? Unbelievable, folks. I thank you for being here. Hope you're doing well. God bless all of you and your families.